Hi, I'm William Hurt, Age of Armor over at DAZ 3D, and I wanted to talk about the new update for the atmospheric cameras. And all the old cameras are still there. We've got, the colorize and depth and fog and volume. All those are still there, and they've been updated to fix a few bugs that crept in 4.5 or 4.6 of DAZ Studio. But the part that I'm really excited about is the new easy volume camera, and I hope you'll like it too. It's one of those that I'm really excited about it. The reason why it's called the easy volume is because you notice that it's only got 5 volume controls. The other one had, I don't know, 15, 16, something like that. And this one only has 5. And they're pretty, the first 3 here are volume color. What color do you want the volume to be? How strong do you want it? And what kind of quality do you want out of it? Those are pretty self-explanatory. When it comes down here to the accept light types and flag lights with intensity of, well, that's a little confusing, but what it allows is certain lights to contribute to the volume and other ones don't. And you can have it to where all of them do if you want to, but I found that most people looking at renders that people were doing and reading in the forums and my own use. I use DAZ Studio. I'm a full-time PA, so I've got DAZ Studio open all day, every day, and I'm doing a lot of renders from a volume camera. So with the old volume camera, I kept on saying, wow, this would be a lot easier if you could just do it from this one light, or you could still set up things that looked good, but it was a little more difficult to use and it rendered slower. So I decided to start over and recode a brand new camera from scratch and just optimize it for the way they used it 99% of the time and myself. And trying to get that code running as fast as possible with all the lights that were out there. Now, I developed these at the same time as the advanced lights. So I was able to work in certain things that made it so they worked really well with each other. I made them work as best as I could with all lights. But having control of my own light code, I was able to incorporate some things in there that just really improved the performance overall. So you'll get a speed boost from this over the old volume camera with any lights you use, but it's going to be a lot more noticeable if you use the advanced lights. But I'll go over that a little bit, the differences here a little bit in the future. Right now, I just want to show some of the basics that carried over from the old camera, but if you haven't used the old camera before, if you're new to this, this will be a good primer overall about how the volume works for both cameras, but specifically the easy volume camera. So if you load it into a scene and you view through the easy volume camera and you render, you're not going to see anything. And that's because the way the volume works is it shoots rays out from the camera that get the distance. They find out how far away something is and then how much air is in between it and the camera and how much light is hitting that air, and so how much volume should I create. Well, in this case, there's nothing in our scene, so the camera doesn't have a distance to go off of, so it doesn't know what to do. So just to put some things in the scene, I'm gonna bring in a sphere and create another primitive, just a plane, something that's about 10 meters in size, and so that the effect is, so you can see the fog effect a little bit. If you render it just like this, you're going to see that you really can't really make out any fogginess or anything. So to make that a little bit more distinctive, that's because just everything in the scene's white. I'm going to add a checkerboard pattern here to the plane. And when you render, you notice, okay, well now you're starting to see some fog effects and stuff, but it's not really anything special. And there's nothing in this background. Well, again, that's because the camera's shooting out a ray and it's not seeing anything. It doesn't know how, well, that's infinite. I don't know how much air is supposed to be between there. So you need to have something in this background. And you could use a sky dome. A lot of products out there, and there's a lot of freebies and stuff that have a sky dome. But if you don't have a sky dome, a real easy solution is just to create a cube primitive and just select the cube primitive and scale it up until it's surrounding your scene. So now your camera's inside of it. You've got this whole thing, and when you render, And you can see, well, it's real bright because it's, calculating how the volume is being hit by the camera rays, by the light rays that are coming from the headlamp on the camera. See, DAZ Studio, if you don't have any other lights in the scene, it puts like a flash bulb on your camera. So that's part of the reason why this render looks so just overly white. It's like taking a picture with a flash on a real foggy day or a foggy night, and it's overwhelming the fog there with light. So if you drop in something like a point light, and I'll just grab that point light and move it up here in the air so it's not in the sphere, and you render. Well, now you can see that the volume's coming directly, from that light, and that light's illuminating it. So that's it's a little bit faint, and that's because, for one thing, point lights have squared fall off, so the intensity of the light falls off exponentially. So something that's 4 feet away will be, a lot dimmer than something that's a foot away or 2 feet away. So one thing you can do with the volume camera here is you can turn up the volume strength. I had it by default at 10%, and that's because the default headlamp floods everything in the scene, and if you use a distant light, that puts so much light into the scene that it would just overpower it. And I didn't want people to load up the camera by default and have it just, flood everything with white to the point where you couldn't see what was going on. So I put it down around 10% so it was strong enough to see, but you wouldn't say, oh, well, it's just rendering white. So now you can see, you can turn up that strength, and it really shows. Now the volume quality is set at 50% by default, and that's what accounts for this graininess that's in here. One thing to take note of is that the quality ramps up on a curve. It's kind of like the fall off on lights, only the other way around. The the higher the quality goes exponentially, the more time it's going to take to render. Now, there isn't that much of a difference in the rendering speed. If we set this at 10%, you'll notice, let's take a look how grainy that is. And let's do 50% and render it. And really, the time that it took to render both of those there's hardly any difference. I mean, it's only a portion of a second maybe. But you can see that the quality's really stepped up. So now, if you go to 80% on the volume quality and render, it still didn't take that much longer, but the grain quality is a lot better. Well, now the difference between 50% and 80% as far as the rendering time wasn't that huge of a leap. Now, this is a real simple scene. You don't even have shadows turned on for the point light, so that's a lot of it. But you notice that the time's not that much different. Again, because it's a really simple scene. More complex scenes, you still won't notice a huge difference between 50 and 80% as far as the rendering time. But once you start getting to like 90%, well, now it's going to start slowing down. It's going to take more time. Still, again, pretty fast there, making a liar out of me. But each increment up, now you're starting to get slower and slower and slower. So you want to be a little bit careful as you start getting into 95 and 100%. Now, you may want 95 or so percent for your final render. Basically, what I'm saying is don't load up the camera and just turn the settings all the way up, because you may be surprised. You're going to get some slow renders when you start getting to 99 and 100%. So the idea is, as you're setting things up and you're just kind of getting your lights all tweaked and your camera angles and everything refined and stuff, bring this down. I mean, 10% or so, and it's going to look grainy, but it gives you an idea of what it's supposed to look like.